Hey out there, this is February 14th, 2019, Valentine's Day. And it's just about 9:28 in the morning here in Northern California. And today, as usual, I'll get into a lot of different stuff. But, I kind of wanted to commemorate this. This is a special day, I think, for humanity. Valentine's Day, love. Um, I firmly contend that a man can't be happy unless he is in love. And the older I get, the more I'm certain that I'm correct about that. Now, I really can't speak for women, but I think that it's the same similar situation. The difference being organically in the sense that, according to the story in Scripture, that God created the man first, and he saw that it wasn't good that we were alone. And so he fashioned a woman. He took a part of Adam. For whatever reason, as a metaphor and allegory, he did this thing. A figure of speech. And he fashioned the woman out of this rib. And he wanted the man to feel incomplete, apparently, because, of course, we know he could have fashioned the woman the same way he fashioned the man out of the dust of the earth. But he did this thing. And so I really can't speak for women, but all I know is that of the two genders, they are the dominant one, which is contrary to popular opinion. I would suggest that, the idea that women have been marginalized through the ages and subjugated under the whims of men, I think is just a facade for the truth. The truth of the matter is that the woman is the more powerful of the species. I mean, we're talking about the gender that can literally extinct the species. That's just science. That's just a fact because, well, I mean, according to law, of course, a man can't force himself on a woman, nor should he be allowed to in a civilized world. I mean, we're human beings. We're like little gods. Of course, we can't behave like the animals because we all know in the animal kingdom that it's quite common. I mean, men go to fisticuffs all the time in the animal kingdom, the male of the species, let's say. But as human beings, as little gods, it's unbecoming of men to do that. So they have to win their prize, let's say, in a different manner. But there is a lot of instances where creatures are forcibly copulated with, let's say. We all know that there's in the animal kingdom that if a female doesn't want it, sometimes she doesn't have the option because instinctively, apparently, might makes right, and human beings know better than that. We're civilized. We're decent. We're supposed to be, at least trying to be. Now, love gets conflated often with sex, and I'm not sure at what point in a person's life that happens, but it can happen pretty young. I know even at 7 years old, I can remember as far back as 7 or 8 that my dad would take me to the barber. We'd go together, and he'd Playboy magazines laying around, and my dad didn't object to me, taking a glance at these magazines, and of course, that stirs emotions in a young man that he doesn't know what to do with. So, he can admire the beauty of the woman, but he doesn't associate it with anything sexual. So the love is merely a kind of an innocent attraction, really. But to trace my love life backwards in a nutshell, it's been about 15 years since I had a girlfriend. It's tough to admit. Anybody that I really liked a lot, that I really felt comfortable with, Rita, was down in Novato, and I met her through my sister, one of my sisters, and I was smitten. And we used to go to church together, and I really liked her a lot. She was divorced, and she had one child, a son. She was very proud of. Really nice guy. I got to meet him in his 20s. His name doesn't come to mind immediately. She had a sister that lived in San Francisco that had a house. We used to frequent. We used to visit her there and would go out to dinner in San Francisco, and we really enjoyed each other's company. We had a lot of fun together. I'd hang out with her in her apartment, and we'd have wine and talk and have dinner, and I would do the dishes. I remember I was happy to contribute in that manner. She was a good cook. Um, she fudged on her age, and that always kind of stuck in my craw, but I'm not going to go so far as to say that's what ended our relationship. Probably about a year later, I guess, it kind of just fizzled, but I think we were both having issues with our former spouses that we were having a hard time letting go, being both devout Christian people. We, so to speak, that we were really having a hard time letting go of the devotion and the vows, till death do we part, all that kind of stuff. It's really tough on a lot of people. Apparently, it's a lot tougher on some than others. But anyhow, before Rita, it had to have been my wife. I tried. There was a couple instances where I tried, but it just really never took off or went anywhere intimate. But my wife, and we ended our relationship in about 1989, and about 7 years after we started it in 1982, when I refused to what's the term, to the term's not coming to mind, but I refused to have relations with her until she agreed to marry me. I was 23 years old, and she was 17, almost 18, and I was utterly smitten with this woman. But I was done with being promiscuous because I spent a large percentage of my teen years being promiscuous. It was very common back then. I don't know what it was, but if you ask anybody from that time period who was a teenager around 1974 to 78, let's say, in that range, there was a lot of promiscuity, and I certainly imbibed in my share. Let's put it that way. It's no small miracle I didn't. According to any of the women, they never reported that I had gotten them pregnant, but it doesn't mean I didn't, because a lot of it was unprotected. But it's amazing that I didn't get any serious diseases too. But before that, before the whole teenage years, it was when I was about 12 years old, I guess, in sixth grade. Sixth and seventh grade is when I really started to be, let's say, obsessed to a degree with this feeling of puppy love and wanting to, have a girlfriend and go steady. It was very popular back then. Even the guy, I mean, it sounds kind of, nowadays I don't know how guys feel about that, but they didn't have a thing called a promise ring back then, but they had, you'd get a ring to go steady with a girl, And I'm not sure I ever had the guts. I don't remember. It was sketchy what had happened. I think I might have bought a ring, back then. I couldn't afford much, but I was probably a little more well off than a lot because my parents owned a lucrative little mom and pop natural food store in town. So town of Felton. I lived in the Santa Cruz Mountains there, but went to San Lorenzo Valley, went to elementary first. That was sixth grade. When we came back from Europe, that was the first school I attended after Ireland. And sixth grade there, my teacher was Ms. Candida. And I remember being infatuated, Tanya DeLangen. I can still remember her name. I mean, we're going back to 1968, 69. 11 years old maybe. But I thought she was just adorable. But, it didn't stick because she was a little conceited because she knew all the guys were, looking at her when she'd get up to speak. Because, so often the cutest girl is always the most outgoing. And confident and intelligent, and that's part of what makes them cute. But if there's any kind of hint of conceit, it's always been a turnoff for me ever since I was a little boy. Well, little boy, I mean, you're going through, puberty starts pretty young. Like most people know it. At least it started, I guess. It's hard to remember, but I guess around that age. But anyhow, there was Barbara Cates Chuck, and she was adorable. She lived in close to the same neighborhood I did, and she just back then this Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet was very popular, the original, and she reminded me of Juliet in that movie, and she just had these just adorable blue eyes. It's very alluring, and I was smitten. And me and another buddy, Dave North, and and he had a girlfriend, Holly, and Holly and Barbara were friends. And I remember we met at Holly's parents had a cabin in Forest Acres, I think they called it, but area, just a heavily wooded redwoods, typically area in just south of the town of Felton. And I remember we'd go there, and I remember Dave and I would. Binaca was very big, so our breath had to smell good. So we're into that, and we went up there, and it was just this heavy-duty puppy love. It was just such a beautiful experience. It was just pure, innocent love because we didn't know a thing about sexuality, and I mean there wasn't even copping a feel that I remember, and it was just a very pure experience. We'd listen to Beatles records, and Here Comes the Sun, all this beautiful stuff, and just hang out and just feel that love, between the couples, and that peace that came with it. It was just so beautiful. But that could have gone somewhere, I suppose. I don't know why it didn't. My parents ended up getting divorced about that time, and that was a very disruptive time in my life. My dad had just about done it when I was 14. He was about done building this sailboat, Fiddler's Green, 48-foot trimaran from bow to stern, bowsprit to stern. It was 48 feet long, and 6-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, wheelhouse, teak wheelhouse, beautiful ship, sailing ship, catch rig. But there was Julie Gray. I remember her. So somehow, Barbara and I had kind of, her parents they were kind of staunch religious people. I think she was involved with her parents in the Jehovah's Witness church, but my parents weren't church-going people at that time. My dad had been disillusioned with the Catholic Church. That was when I was a little boy, and we're going back to 1960, probably 62, 63, in that period. But for whatever reason, he dropped out of the Catholic religion. I think some of his religions, I know his mother was, his relatives were Catholic, very nice people. The Murrays from Norwich, Connecticut, and nicest people you could ever meet. Kay, his sister, and Bill Murray, Bill Murray Jr., very eccentric artist, my favorite cousin, I always tell him. But very unique individual, very, very artistic, very good. He could easily have been world-renowned, very famous if he gave a crap. But just a beautiful individual. Had some good family. But anyhow, so there was Julie Gray I was smitten with, and for whatever reason that never went anywhere. And like I said, my life was in disarray with my parents. You know how it is when you're that age. You got to do what your parents say. 2 older sisters who were already, I'm pretty sure, sexually active.